Why INFJs give up on people silently. Today, I want to speak directly to the intuitive hearts, those quiet perceivers of emotional undercurrents, the ones who notice everything yet say so little. Today's video is made for you, INFJs, or for anyone who loves one deeply enough to wonder why they sometimes retreat without warning, why they step back silently, without confrontation, without dramatic speeches, without a single clue that something inside them has reached its quiet breaking point, and why, after giving so much of themselves, they slip away in a way that feels gentle on the outside, but is the result of something intensely heavy happening within their internal world. Now, INFJs, you are known as the rarest personality type, but rarity itself means little. It is the quality of your mind, the depth of your insights, the compassion that seems to flow naturally out of you, the uncanny ability to see the truth behind what others say, the deeper meaning behind what others do, the emotional shadows behind the masks people wear. And because of this heightened sensitivity, because of the way you absorb emotional information almost like oxygen, the reasons you give up on people are not superficial, they are not impulsive, they are not born out of coldness or cruelty, but instead they grow out of deep psychological patterns that shape how you understand human connection, how you protect your inner world, and how you preserve your emotional energy when something feels irreparably wrong. 1. Because they notice the shift long before anyone else does. Imagine you are sitting with someone you care about, maybe a friend, maybe a partner, maybe a family member, and on the surface everything looks normal. The conversation is simple, the moment is nothing special, but inside you feel a subtle shift, a tiny change in their energy, a micro-expression, a tone difference, a pattern that breaks just slightly, a hint of emotional drift, and your intuition, that quiet but remarkably accurate internal guide, whispers that something is different. For most people, such a shift would go completely unnoticed, but for you as an INFJ, it becomes a seed of awareness that continues to grow. Because you watch, you absorb, and your mind starts weaving together observations that others would dismiss as nothing. Yet to you, they form a picture that you cannot ignore. You start to see inconsistencies between their words and their behavior. You feel an emotional distancing, even when they claim nothing is wrong. You sense intentions shifting, even before the person consciously admits it. And because your personality type is built on intuitive pattern recognition, these small indicators accumulate into something definitive. But the painful truth is that once you notice the shift, once your intuition confirms that something essential has changed, you begin to detach quietly, not because you want to, but because your heart is bracing for something you already know is coming. Most people assume INFJs leave suddenly, but the truth is that the decision was made long before you ever walked away. You leave silently, because the realization came silently, and for you, that is reason enough. 2. Because they feel the other person stop valuing the connection. INFJs invest deeply in their relationships, and that depth is not casual. It is deliberate, intentional, and emotionally expensive. When you care for someone, you do it completely, pouring your attention, empathy, insight, and emotional energy into the relationship, often giving more than you receive. Not because you expect rewards, but because caring that deeply is simply who you are. But beneath that generosity lies a fragile truth. INFJs can feel when they are no longer valued. It is not something that requires a dramatic rejection, not a fight, not a cruel comment, not a grand betrayal, but rather a gradual erosion, a slow fading of the other person's effort, presence, and appreciation. Maybe they stop asking how you're doing. Maybe they stop listening as deeply as they used to. Maybe they start taking your support for granted, as if your emotional care was something automated rather than something you choose to give. Maybe they speak to you differently, colder, shorter, more dismissively. Maybe they simply stop showing up. And when that happens, INFJs do not beg for attention. They do not demand validation. They do not fight to be valued again. Instead, they withdraw with grace, quietly acknowledging that their presence is no longer meaningful to the other person. Their silent departure is not revenge. It is acceptance. And acceptance hurts far more than anger ever could. 3. because they realize they are being drained emotionally. INFJs have an emotional reservoir that is deep but not infinite. They can absorb feelings, stress, pain, and confusion from others with incredible sensitivity, and often they become the emotional anchor for the people around them, the person everyone comes to for comfort, validation, or understanding. But over time, this emotional labor takes a toll, especially when the relationship becomes one-sided. Perhaps the other person constantly complains but never listens. Perhaps they need endless reassurance but offer none in return. Perhaps they rely on your insight but cannot handle your emotional truth. Perhaps they depend on your strength but never notice when you are exhausted. And because INFJs rarely express their needs openly, the emotional depletion goes unnoticed by everyone except themselves. Eventually, they reach a point where giving any more would mean losing part of themselves, losing their energy, their clarity, their internal peace, and when that moment comes, INFJs do not explode or confront or accuse. They simply step back, quietly reclaiming the emotional space they had been sacrificing for far too long. They leave not because they stopped caring, but because they finally realized they had to care for themselves. 4. Because they have tried to fix things in every silent way possible. INFJs do not give up on people impulsively. They give up after trying all the invisible ways they know to repair the connection. They adjust their tone. They become more patient. They offer emotional clarity. They give more time. They try to understand the other person more deeply. They pick their words carefully. They anticipate needs. They apologize even when they are not wrong, simply to restore harmony. They forgive quietly, repeatedly, even without receiving an apology. And they hope silently that the relationship will recover, that the emotional imbalance will settle, that the misunderstandings will dissolve. But when every attempt fails, when every effort goes unnoticed, when every intuitive adjustment is met with resistance or indifference, INFJs hit a private emotional threshold. And when that threshold is crossed, something inside them closes permanently, not angrily, not dramatically. 5. Because they feel the other person's true intentions. INFJs have an uncanny ability to read people, and while they often doubt themselves externally, internally, they usually know when something is off. They sense hidden motives. They detect emotional dishonesty. They see through excuses. They feel when someone is manipulating them, even subtly. They know when someone is lying long before the lie is spoken. They notice when loyalty shifts. They sense relational danger before it becomes visible. And while they may give people the benefit of the doubt at first, the moment their intuition confirms that the other person's intentions are no longer genuine, supportive, or aligned with the relationship's well-being, INFJs quietly withdraw their trust. Once trust begins to fade, INFJs do not fight to restore it. They simply stop giving the parts of themselves that made the connection intimate and meaningful. And when trust is gone completely, they leave with a calmness that reflects how long they have silently carried the truth inside them. 6. Because they cannot handle superficial or inauthentic relationships. INFJs crave depth, authenticity, emotional resonance, and meaningful connection. And while they can navigate small talk, adapt to surface-level interactions, and blend into the social environment, they cannot thrive in relationships that lack sincerity or emotional honesty. When the relationship becomes shallow, transactional, or emotionally distant, INFJs feel themselves shrinking inside, as if they are losing access to the very parts of themselves that make connection worth having. Maybe the other person only talks about trivial things. Maybe they avoid vulnerability. Maybe they pretend everything is fine when it is not. Maybe they refuse to engage on a deeper emotional or intellectual level. Or maybe they create a relationship dynamic where true authenticity is unwelcome or dismissed. And for an INFJ, staying in such a connection feels like suffocating in silence. Eventually, they realize that remaining in a superficial relationship is more painful than leaving it. So they walk away quietly, preferring the peace of solitude over the emptiness of inauthentic connection. 7. Because they have outgrown the connection. INFJs evolve constantly, though often invisibly. Their inner world is always shifting. expanding, deepening, and gaining new insights. And because of this ongoing inner transformation, relationships that once felt aligned may begin to feel limiting or stagnant. Maybe the other person stops growing. Maybe they show no interest in self-awareness. Maybe they resist change. Maybe they dismiss emotional or intellectual development. Maybe they repeat the same patterns without introspection. And because INFJs cannot remain in environments that restrict their growth, they begin to feel emotionally trapped. They try to inspire change. They try to guide gently. They try to uplift the other person. But when growth becomes impossible within the relationship, INFJs eventually detach, not out of resentment, but out of an internal pull towards something deeper, something more aligned with their evolving sense of purpose. They leave silently because they know that explaining their growth would be misunderstood or minimized, and because some journeys must be taken alone. 8. Because silence is their final act of self-protection. INFJs do not fear conflict. They fear emotional damage. They do not avoid confrontation because they are weak. They avoid it because they know it rarely leads to understanding. They prefer silence because silence protects their inner world from being misinterpreted, dismissed, or invalidated. When INFJs give up on someone silently, it is their final boundary, their last attempt to guard their emotional core, their way of preventing further pain. They leave quietly because explaining anything would require vulnerability they no longer feel safe giving. They leave quietly because the relationship has already ended internally. They leave quietly because speaking would only prolong the pain. They leave quietly because silence is the only language that honors the depth of what they feel. And most importantly, they leave quietly because they know the person they are walking away from would not understand the words anyway. If you are an INFJ listening to this, you may feel a heaviness in your chest, a recognition, a sense of being understood in a way that feels both comforting and painful. Because silent endings are something you carry alone, something you rarely explain, something you navigate in the privacy of your inner world. But I want you to hear this clearly. Your silence does not make you weak. Your silence does not make you cold. Your silence does not mean you did not care. Your silence is the result of caring too deeply for too long. And if someone has an INFJ in their life, and they notice them growing distant, quieter, more withdrawn, more reserved, I hope this video helps them understand that an INFJ stepping back is not sudden at all. It is the end of a long emotional journey they never saw. INFJs do not give up easily, but when they do, it is final. If you found this video meaningful, consider sharing it with someone who needs to understand the INFJ heart a little more deeply. And until next time, take care of your intuitive soul, because the world needs the depth you bring, even when it does not always know how to appreciate it. Just decisively. Once the INFJ heart reaches that point, leaving becomes a matter of emotional necessity, not preference. And because all their attempts were silent, their departure looks silent too.